For a playoff race, Richmond kind of sucked. Let's get into it. This is the fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of the fuel. Going to be doing something a little bit different this weekend, because this weekend we actually had the IndyCar Series finale as well. But I'm actually going to have that in a separate video to kind of give the championship finale for the IndyCar Series its own video, its own review. So for this video, we're only going to be doing the Cup race that happened on Saturday night, the 2019 Federated Auto Parts 400 at the Richmond International Raceway. The second race of the round of 16 in the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series playoff. I'm just going to go ahead and make it real clear here. This race sucked. I mean, it had some bright moments here and there, but other than that, I mean, there was just nothing really to this race that we're going to remember. You know, it was just that fucking boring. I mean, it was better than the Brickyard 400, that much I will give it. But I mean, as far as, you know, overall feel, this race was just not that good. It really wasn't. Thankfully, the Roval is next week, as it's called. I still call it an infield road course, but at least that's going to be coming next week, which is going to be awesome. And hopefully it'll rain. So that way we'll have a rain race for the first time ever. Only time will tell on that point. So let's go ahead and get into things. First off, let's get to the news of the week. Alright, not much in the way of news this week, but a couple of big notes here. Richard Childress Racing has basically played its hand and will be releasing Daniel Hemric from the number 8 car at the end of the 2019 season. Of course, Hemric is just in his rookie year, but he has not been that impressive whatsoever. I mean, for the most part, he's been kind of non-existent for the most part. And we don't really talk about him in reviews, and it seems like whenever we do talk about him, he's being caught up in an accident or something. I mean, we've hardly ever talked about him being anywhere near the front of the field. You might say, well, Daniel Hemric's being done dirty, and you know what, maybe he is. But now, let's be completely honest here. What has Daniel Hemric done in his entire career in NASCAR? He has no truck wins, and he has no Xfinity wins, yet he got bumped up to the Cup Series to drive the 8 car for Richard Childress Racing. How does that make any sense? I mean, so you can make the argument that, you know, he's just not ready whatsoever. I mean, he honestly should have stayed in the Truck Series. So why he got bumped up to Cup this early is beyond me. So he has done, maybe he has been done dirty, but at the same time, he just hasn't done anything to warrant him even being in a Cup car. So who are they going to get to drive the 8 car next year? Well, I don't think it's been made official yet, but I think the obvious choice is Tyler Reddick. I mean, look what he's doing. Look what Tyler Reddick is doing in the Xfinity Series this year. Of course, he's coming off, you know, the year where he won the championship last year, although he only won twice, which was the opener and the ender. And there were a lot of people like, did he really deserve to be the champion? So he moved over to Richard Childress Racing in the Xfinity Series, and he's basically setting the world on fire. I think he has 5 wins so far this year, so he's definitely up the ante as far as trying to defend his championship. But regardless of whether he does or not, I think it's pretty obvious that Reddick is going to be in that 8 car next year. And unlike Daniel Hemric, it makes sense with Reddick. You know, and you got Christopher Bell, who's probably going to the 95 car next year. Cole Custer, depending on what might happen, he could either end up at the 32 car next year, or, when's willing, he'll probably end up in either the 14 or the 41. So you could get, you know, the big three of the Xfinity Series, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, and Cole Custer, up to the Cup Series, and those three have a tremendous amount of talent. You know, I mean, that would be a great rookie battle for 2020. Nothing, I don't think, like I said, anything's been confirmed as far as Tyler Reddick moving up to the 8 car, but I mean, you can see it coming from a mile away. And a bit of a follow-up from a story from back in July. Results of crew chief Nick Harrison's autopsy has been revealed. Now, if you remember, Nick Harrison was the crew chief for Justin Haley in the Xfinity Series, and he died basically the day of the New Hampshire race, basically hours after the New Hampshire race, at the Xfinity New Hampshire race back in July. And a lot of people thought that the heat was involved, because it was a pretty hot day that day, but as it turned out, and this was a bit of a shocker, his autopsy revealed that there was traces of cocaine, Oxycontin, and alcohol in his system. Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise, and it's like, wow, I didn't know he was into that shit. And all three of those in combination, that's not a good cocktail. And also considering his age, it was just, I mean, that's just a very explosive combination, and ended up taking Nick Harrison's life, unfortunately. That kind of sucks, because man, I can't imagine what his family must be feeling right now after hearing something like that. You know, to hear that, you know, his death may have been attributed to drug use. It's a bit of a surprise, but it's also kind of a shame. So that'll do it for the news of the week. So let's go ahead and get into the review itself. Alright, so the 2019 Federated Auto Parts 400 at Richmond. It wasn't that intriguing, folks. I mean, in fact, there were 400 laps of this friggin' race. I have 2 full pages of notes. That's it. So not a whole hell of a lot went on in this race. Stages 1 and 2 were 100 laps, and then stage 3 was 200 laps. We had 3 total pure lead changes in this race, and they were all by the same guy, Martin Truex Jr. We'll be getting to all that here in a second. Brad Keselowski started the race from the pole. Denny Hamlin got by Kyle Busch for 4th, and Elliott by 3rd, so Hamlin was on the move early. Hamlin got up to 2nd by getting by Harvick, and then Martin Truex started coming towards the front. Even though Truex had already won and advanced with his win at Las Vegas, Truex made it clear that he's not going to be done there, because he's going to be going for extra playoff points, because those carry over. So any additional playoff points that he gets from stage wins or race wins, that gets added on to his playoff total, and that gets carried over during the course of the playoffs. So the next round, because of his win at Las Vegas, that's additional playoff points that get added to his total, which in turn gives him a better opportunity to make it to the championship 4. Kyle Busch gets by Elliott for the 5th position. Hamlin and Truex start catching Keselowski for the lead, and Kyle Busch is right behind him. Basically, this race was the Joe Gibbs Racing show. All of the Joe Gibbs cars were up front pretty much all night. They led most of this race, pretty much. Between Kyle Busch and Truex, they led most of this race. Which was, I think, another reason why a lot of people didn't really like this race. I just didn't like it because it just wasn't that interesting. Kez starts going 3 wide with lap traffic, and he did that twice. Truex did the same thing. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I said, that was one of the highlights. Truex starts challenging Keselowski for the lead on lap 52. Ricky Stenhouse pits for fresh tires. This was a strategy we saw back in the spring where people were pitting for fresh tires. Stenhouse was one of them. And if the race went green, they would actually be fast enough to unlap themselves after going 2 laps down, because fresh tires halfway through a 100 lap run, because the tires, were going off so badly. I mean, fresh tires were about 2 seconds a lap, which is insanely quick, especially at a short track. And Stenhouse was able to unlap himself. It didn't really do any good because I don't think he finished in the top 10. But it was an interesting strategy, and it did work for the most part back in the spring, just not really so much here. Then we had our first pure lead change when Martin Truex Jr. Got by Keselowski for the race lead on lap 54. Kyle Busch gets by Hamlin for the 3rd position. Joey Logano did not have a good race. I mean, he went a lap down multiple times, was able to get back onto the lead lap multiple times, but his car was just not there in this race. Certainly did not look like someone who is a championship contender. He went a lap down on lap 73. Kyle Busch starts challenging Keselowski for 2nd and finally gets it, but is 6.3 seconds behind Truex. And MTJ wins stage number 1. Everyone comes in for service, and Kyle Busch wins the race off pit road this time. So Kyle Busch leads the start of stage 2. William Byron has a tire rub after contact, which actually was the result of 3 wide between himself, Austin Dillon, and Alex Bowman, which leads to our first caution on lap 112. Alex Bowman gets spun in turns 3 and 4 after Austin Dillon intentionally spins him out after 3 wide contact involving, like I said, himself and William Byron. And yeah, I mean, maybe Bowman was a bit aggressive there, going 3 wide into turn 1. But for Austin Dillon to spin him out like that intentionally, that's pretty fucking low, honestly. And honestly, I wouldn't expect anything less from Austin Dillon. The guy is fucking trash as a driver. And yet Richard Childress keeps him around because it's his grandson. Who gives a fuck? Austin Dillon is fucking garbage. Okay, let's be completely clear here. His only 2 wins, maybe 2 the biggest wins that he could get, the Coca-Cola 600 and the Daytona 500. But the Coca-Cola 600 he won on fuel mileage, and the Daytona 500 he won because he wrecked fucking Eric Almirola on the last lap like the fucking douche nozzle that he is. So fuck Austin Dillon. He's a silver spoon eating motherfucker who honestly does not deserve to be in that 3 car. Because he has not shown himself to be anywhere near consistent to be even considered a championship contender. And yet this motherfucker has been in the Cup Series since 2014, and he hasn't done jack fucking shit. I mean, he may have a Daytona 500 win, but let's be honest here. If that's your only claim to fame, then you really aren't worth jack shit. You might say, well, he did win the Xfinity Championship. Yeah, with 0 wins. Not exactly the hallmark of a champion. The one and only winless champion in NASCAR history. Is that what you want your claim to fame to be? That you were a champion even though you didn't win a damn race? That's not exactly something I would want. So no, fuck Austin Dillon. Piece of chicken shit. And that was a chicken shit move on his part. Kyle Busch leads on the restart. Keselowski starts bull rushing back towards the front after he pitted for fresh tires. Chase Elliott and Clint Bowyer start fighting hard for the 7th position. The leaders get into a lot of lap traffic at this point. Erik Jones moves up to 4th past Kevin Harvick, putting JGR in positions 1 through 4. So, like I said, this was the JGR show. Truex challenges Kyle Busch for the race lead in lap traffic with 12 to go in stage 1. Keselowski gets by Harvick for 5th. Kyle Busch starts getting into heavy traffic once again, but he's able to get through it. and he's able to hold Truex at bay and wins stage number 2. And at this point, I'm like, this race is really sucking some ass so far. We're already through stage 2 already. Everyone comes in for service. Kyle Busch wins the race off pit road. Then we get to stage number 3. Ryan Newman was up to 5th at this point on lap 213, and it was actually a legitimate 5th, which kind of surprised the hell out of me. Second caution came out on lap 243 when the 77 resorts and loses the right front tire in turn 2, probably from a brake rotor failure. Everyone comes in for service, and Keselowski wins the race off pit road this time. Eric Almirola gets caught for speeding on pit road, which is pretty costly for him. So Kes leads on the restart. Truex moves up to 2nd after Kyle Busch spins the tires on the restart. Ryan Newman gets up to 3rd, which is like, what? This is a guy who, barely squeaked into the top 16, and now all of a sudden he's having good runs in the playoff. It's like, where the fuck were these performances at the beginning of the year? Maybe then I would have taken you a little bit more seriously than I had been. I mean, I will give credit where credit is due. That 6 team is finding its step a little bit, honestly. I mean, maybe getting into the playoff is what they needed to kickstart their mojo. I mean, like I said, I'm still not a big fan of Ryan Newman, but I will give him credit where credit is due. These first 2 races, he's actually done pretty good. I mean, he finished 10th at Las Vegas last week, and he actually got a top 5 finish here at Richmond, which there's a little caveat to that I will get to in a minute. And it really begs the question, and Eric Estep actually alluded to this too. Why did Ricky Stenhouse get a 2-year contract extension? I mean, he didn't even make the playoff. I mean, I don't even think he's in the top 20 in points, and yet he got a contract extension. And while that's going on, Ryan Newman made the playoff with the 6 car. It's absolutely ridiculous. Kyle Busch gets back by Newman for 3rd. Hamlin gets by Newman for 4th. Truex gets a great run on Keselowski for the race lead and gets it back for a 2nd pure lead change of the day on lap 282. Kyle Busch gets by Keselowski for 2nd. Erik Jones nudges Newman out of the way for 5th, so Newman once again being a hard as hell to pass prick, and Jones decided he wasn't going to take any more of the shit. Truex with a 2 1/4 second lead with 100 laps to go. Hamlin gets by Keselowski for the 3rd position. Kurt Busch kicks off green flag stops in lap 314, but gets burned by the 3rd and final caution on lap 315 when Ricky Stenhouse, who also pitted for fresh tires, locks it up going into turn 3, gets loose, locks it up going into turn 3, and spins Truex out, the leader of the race. You see, this just led into another reason why Stenhouse shouldn't have that 17 car. I mean, he is a streaky driver, and that's being polite. Because let's be completely honest here. I mean, he might have some semblance of talent driving that car, because he does seem to have flashes of brilliance at points, but he just makes way too many mistakes. And the fact that he still has that 17 car after all these years, I think this is his 7th season in the Cup Series, and he's still making shit ass mistakes like this. It's like, it's time for Stenhouse to be put out to pasture. It's time for Roush Fenway to go in a different direction, because Stenhouse is not working. It's just not working out. And when he continues to make dumb mistakes like this, I mean, it just exemplifies that. Everyone comes in for service, and Kyle Busch leads on the restart since he inherited it when Truex got spun out. Thankfully, Truex didn't get hit by anybody, and he only lost a couple spots because he did have a pretty decent lead, so he was able to get it back around. And even though he lost the lead, he wasn't that far behind, and everybody was going to be coming to pit road anyway, so, it didn't hurt him as much as it could have. Of course, it would have if somebody had hit him. But thankfully, nobody did. So Jones and Newman start fighting hard for the 5th position. Again, those two were... That was actually one of the more interesting battles of this race, was Jones and Newman. Truex gets by Hamlin for 2nd, but is 1.4 seconds back with 40 laps to go. But he does start catching him little by little by little, and begins challenging Busch for the lead with 26 laps to go. And then he gets a great run around the outside of Kyle Busch, and takes the lead for a 3rd and final pure lead change of the day on lap 376. Kyle actually tries to nudge Truex out of the way, actually gets into his left rear quarter panel and turns 1 and 2, tries to loosen him up, but Truex actually held on to it. And then you have JGR 1, 2, 3, 4 with 20 laps to go, and that's basically the way it would stay for the remainder of the race. Bowyer, Suarez, and Johnson fighting for 9th in the closing laps. But in the end, it was Martin Truex Jr. who goes back-to-back for the first time in his career. Sweeps Richmond for the year, so he gets his first 2 career short track victories, both at Richmond. And he also pulls off the spin and win, which we don't really see all that much. So he gets all 3 of those, goes back-to-back for the first time, sweeps Richmond for the year, and does the spin and win. I think he's pretty much certain notice that he is the championship favorite. You know, and there were some people at the beginning of the year like, he's not going to win a race in that 19 car. I mean, look what happened with Suarez the last 2 years. Suarez is still trying to get his feet under him, whereas Truex has entered the prime of his career. I mean, you honestly think that Joe Gibbs is going to... I mean, it's like, well, why did they get rid of... And there were still some people like, why did Joe Gibbs get rid of Suarez? Because Suarez sucks. That's just the bottom line. And Truex is a guy who's in the prime of his career right now. I mean, he's approaching 40, but he's what we would call a late bloomer. Because from 2007 to about 2014, I mean, he was pretty much an irrelevant driver, with just 2 wins to his credit. And then 2015, you know, him and Cole Pearn hook up, and look at what they've accomplished since. 23 victories from 2015 to now. Truex is what we would call a late bloomer, and he has arguably entered the prime of his career. He is a super hot commodity right now, and you know, he proved it when he won the championship in 2017. And you honestly think Joe Gibbs is going to, you know, lose an opportunity like that to get, you know, one of the best drivers of, you know, this time frame on his team? You're crazy. So JGR with their first 1, 2, 3, 4 finish, which, yeah, we're going to have to talk about that. Because after the race at about 1 o'clock local time, Erik Jones was disqualified from the 4th position because his car's rear toe was out way too much. This means that Erik Jones is the first Cup driver since the disqualification rules were put back in to be disqualified from a Cup race. All of the disqualifications that we had been seeing were in the Xfinity or the Truck Series. This is actually the first disqualification in the Cup Series this year, after 28 races. That's pretty crazy. So, let's take a look at the race results real quick. Alright. So, with the disqualification of Erik Jones, Martin Truex Jr. of course gets the win. Kyle Busch second. That's still got to be so frustrating for him, considering that he hasn't won in quite some time. Denny Hamlin in third. So with Erik Jones' disqualification, Brad Keselowski moves up to fourth. Ryan Newman moves up to fifth. He had finished sixth, but he gets his number 6 Ford into the top 5 and has actually a pretty decent shot at making it to the round of 12. Kyle Larson comes home in the 6th position. Kevin Harvick in 7th. Clint Bowyer in 8th. Still a little bit behind though in the points. Daniel Suarez in 9th, and Jimmy Johnson notches a top 10. Joey Logano actually recovered to finish 11th. Couple of honorable mentions. Darrell Wallace Jr. finished 12th. Matt DiBenedetto 14th. Not bad by those guys. Pretty decent runs. As the dog starts barking. Damn it. Alright, give me 1 second and we'll take a look at... That's not what I wanted. Damn it, quit doing that. Alright, give me 1 second and we'll take a look at the point standings as they are right now. Alright, so here are the playoff standings after race 2 in the round of 16 with just the Charlotte Road Course yet to come. That's certainly going to have some people on edge. But we have 3 drivers who have locked their way into the round of 12. One based on victories, the other 2 on points. If you have a gap of at least 60 points to the cutoff line, then you're pretty much good. And look at that. Look at the top 3. Martin Truex Jr., who has 2 wins in this round so far. Kevin Harvick, who's plus 68, is second. Kyle Busch, plus 67, is third. They've all transferred to the round of 12. The big 3 is back in town, boys. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, that's basically what Martin Truex Jr., Kevin Harvick, and Kyle Busch were last year. They were known as the big 3 because more often than not, they were at the front of the field and they actually won a large majority of the races last year. And now they're already advancing to the round of 12. As the fucking dog continues to bark. Denny Hamlin is 4th. Brad Keselowski is 5th. Joey Logano 6th. So basically, you know, the guys that you would expect to be up there at the front are right there at the front in the top 6. Chase Elliott is 7th, plus 36. Kyle Larson is 8th, plus 24. Shut the fuck up, dog. Damn. Ryan Newman, plus 13. So he's not out of the woods, because, again, there's 60 points to be had. But he's put himself in a pretty decent spot. Ryan Blaney, but basically the guys from about 10th on back, they're definitely in the danger zone. Ryan Blaney, who, of course, is the defending winner of the Charlotte Road Course. Eric Almirola, who's only plus 3. William Byron, only plus 2. And then you got the guys who are in the red. Alex Bowman at minus 2. Clint Boyer at minus 5. Kurt Busch at minus 15, who only finished 18th at Richmond. Basically got burned on that third caution. And Erik Jones, who actually had worked his way back into single digits as far as his deficit was concerned. But due to the failure of his team, he lost all of those points that he earned and is now at minus 45, and he's basically in a must-win situation. You know, I feel bad for Erik Jones because, I mean, he basically earned his way into the playoff with that huge win in the Southern 500. You know, in back-to-back years, I mean, first 2 races of this playoff basically has put him in a must-win situation because of mechanical issues, basically. Las Vegas, he had a transmission failure, and then in this race, he gets disqualified because the rear toe was out too far. It just sucks because he worked really hard to get that 4th place finish, earn all of them stage points, and basically worked himself back into a position to where he actually had a chance to advance to the next round. But he's going to need to win at the Charlotte Road Course in order to even have a chance. And that sucks. As for my final rating for the Federated Auto Parts 400, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. It just wasn't that good. It had some highlights, but there was really nothing. There's nothing worth going back and watching, honestly. It was a forgettable race for the most part. You know, what has the potential to not be a forgettable race, but maybe one of the best races of the year, depending on the circumstances, it's the next race that's coming up. The Bank of America Roval 400, the Charlotte Road Course race, where they actually redid the backstretch chicane. And it's not one of them slapped together ones. They actually put a little more time and effort into it to make it, to kind of slow speeds down on the backstretch. And it'll be interesting to see how all that turns out. And That might also be the only time I cover the Xfinity race on here of the season. I mean, I did one for the Truck Series. I might as well do one for the Xfinity Series as well. And I think it's going to be the Charlotte Road Course that I do. So that'll do it for today. Thank you very much for watching. And until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. Bye. Well, that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, favorite, like, and subscribe to my channels here on youtube.com and over on bitchute.com. If you would like to sponsor my channel, go to my channel page at subscribestar.com. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. Have a good one.